died, dead or not yet. I don't know exactly. They don't give any information from the hospital team now. After that, they start to use the gas bomb against the protesters. But what's wondering is the police forces, the army forces was there, and nothing. They did nothing.
Okay.
The security forces started to shoot, live shoot and a gas bomb, but they did nothing till the security forces start to use Molotov against the protesters. They make fire in some of the cars in the front of the building. Also, the building in the front being fired. In this moment, the army start to move and go inside the building, and they stop shooting after this moment. But the people still there.
Okay, and what is the situation outside that security building right now?
Actually, they found some burning inside the building. There are some fires there, but the demonstrators did not make this fire. It looks like that the soldiers or the people inside the building make fires in some rooms or something like this, and then fires inside the building and fires outside the building. But the demonstrators, they don't use anything just to make these fires outside or inside.
Okay, Mohammed Sudan, thanks for that update there on what's going on in Alexandria. That's Mohammed Sudan of the Muslim Brotherhood and a community organizer talking to us about the latest events there in Alexandria. Now, moving on to Iraq, and anti-government voices there are getting louder. On Friday, thousands of protesters rallied in the central Tahrir Square in the capital, Baghdad. Fed up with poor salaries and bad public services, they want Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's government to shape up or go. AlJazeera's Jaina Raf reports.
Iraq's government may be just a few months old, but already these Iraqis want a new one. "We're sorry we elected you," they chant. And the symbol of last year's elections, now a subject of derision. Among the crowd, Muntader Zaidi, the man who so famously threw his shoe at U.S. President George Bush 2 years ago.
I believe, and I'm very optimistic by the brave Iraqi people who will demonstrate every Friday, and this is a continuing force that will shake the Iraqi government and have them answer our demands.
And the first demand, he says, is to end the American presence in Iraq. It was clear Prime Minister Maliki's promise to improve services within 100 days wasn't enough.
And if you tell us that 100 days is enough, it's not enough, because we will still remind you that we are here and we can do change.
After last week's protest turned violent, riot police were on high alert.
Authorities ordered these protesters to go more than an hour ago, but they're in no mood to leave. It's not just the hours it took them to walk here, it's the years they've been waiting for their lives to improve.
It's a test for the government and a test for security forces. How to deal with demonstrators who aren't letting curfews, blast walls, or riot police keep them away. Jaina Raf, AlJazeera, Baghdad.
Crowds in Jordan's capital, Amman, have been demanding political reforms and a constitutional monarchy. Jordan's Prime Minister has rejected calls to strip King Abdullah of his powers. The government has made several concessions in the past month, but opposition groups say they don't go far enough. There's been further unrest on the streets of Bahrain as protesters call for sweeping political reforms. Thousands of anti-government demonstrators surrounded state television headquarters in the town of Isa. It follows clashes between Sunni and Shia groups on Thursday, the first direct confrontation between the two sides since the start of large-scale protests. There have been rallies both for and against Oman's ruler. Anti-government protesters gathered in the Sultanate's second biggest city, Soha, to demand political reform, an end to corruption and higher wages. Our special correspondent is there for his own safety. We're not naming him.
Friday prayer in Oman's second largest city of Soha, and more than 2,000 protesters turned the main traffic intersection into a place of worship. The anti-government sentiment here in Oman differs from the rest of the region's turmoil in two key ways. There's been much less violence and much more love for their leader.
We are making this to support the Sultan. not to face the Sultan. This is another thing. We are just facing the corruption here.
Sultan Qaboos Al Sayed brought peace to Oman soon after taking power in a palace coup 41 years ago. He also delivered paved roads, a public health system and more women's rights than other Gulf countries. But like the rest of the Arab world, Omanis now yearn for more.
The protesters' demands are listed very clearly right here in the middle of the roundabout. Number one is to dismiss all government ministers and investigate them for corruption. Number two is they want a new parliament elected by the people. And number three is to find more jobs for Omanis and raise everybody's salaries.
Military helicopters buzz over the crowd, but there hasn't been a repeat of last week's violence, where at least one protester was killed by riot police, while a shopping centre, police station and government building were all torched. These protesters say they denounce acts of violence, but hope a calm, peaceful plea will be heard by their beloved leader.
If he did know, he will change, we are sure.
How long do you plan to stay here for?
Until all our demands will be achieved.
The role of the military is key here now, respected by the people much more than the police, but they have very little experience in dealing with civil unrest, leaving the days ahead filled with uncertainty.
Now to the state of the economy in the United States. The Obama administration is taking credit for the latest unemployment figures. Let's go back to Jane Dutton in Washington for the details. Jane?
Yeah, they are indeed. Private sector job gains in February have pushed the unemployment rate below 9% for the first time in nearly 2 years, according to the U.S. Labor Department. Employers in the U.S. have added 192,000 jobs in February. That's more than 3 times the number of jobs added in January. The unemployment rate has dropped to 8.9%, but 13.7 million people are still looking for work. That's almost double that of the figures before the recession. Job growth in February was spurred by the private sector, with the biggest gains in manufacturing, construction, and professional and business services. Joining me live is Neil Irwin, financial reporter at the Washington Post. Neil, what do you make of these figures?
Well, what we've seen is the U.S. economy has been growing for about a year and a half now, and there have been some signs of progress. Business investment is up, consumer spending, consumer confidence, but jobs had not followed until now. We're finally seeing employers actually add to their payrolls, hire people, put people back to work. Not fast enough to really change things quickly, but it's progress.
And are those figures true, considering the bad weather in January and how many people stayed at home?
That's right. What happened is the January number was worse than it probably should have been, because there were a lot of snowstorms across the United States. Some people couldn't make it into work during the week of the survey. So the job situation was probably better in January than it looked, and probably not quite as good in February as it looked.
OK, so what does this mean for the economy now? Is starting to see people going back to work? Are we seeing more hiring? Are we going to see more lending from the banks?
Yeah, if this momentum holds up, which there's every indication it will, there's strong momentum in the economy now. There's a gradual acceleration happening. That's the kind of thing that can really get the economy into a better place over the course of the next year or two. That said, there are some risks out there. There's oil